Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean, bringing you another episode. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about the tight ends in the NFL draft, how bad the Bulls stink, the Blackhawks, we're getting ready for the playoffs, and some of the Bears free agent news. All this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league team of the Chicago Blackhawks. That means when you go to the games, you get to see the stars of the Blackhawks, the future stars of the Blackhawks, today. You get to see them today. And at a low family-friendly price of starting at just $7 a ticket. Located only 90 minutes from the city limits. Visit icehogs.com. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. And there's only 8 home games left in this season. So get your butts out there to Rockford to see the Rockford Ice Hogs at BMO Harris Bank Center. Next home game is March 8th versus Milwaukee. And then if you don't go see them that week, you got to wait a whole week till the 15th to see him play against Charlotte. So go to icehogs.com, get your tickets now. I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to talk about the Bulls. I normally don't want to talk about the Bulls first. I usually lead with the Bears, but I want to talk about the Bulls because they really stink. Let's start with 2 back-to-back blowouts. Absolute miserable blowouts of epic proportions in the history of the franchise of the Chicago Bulls. They lose one really bad laugher stinker game against Miami Heat. Okay, you have a bad night. Things aren't going well. You've got injuries. Miami's a pretty decent team, even without LeBron. Blah, blah, blah. We get it. But you come back the next night, the next game, and you go, you know what? We got our butts kicked up and down the floor. We gave up ungodly amounts of points in the paint. They had their way with us. Let's play harder. Let's play better. We're all professionals. We know what we're supposed to be doing. Let's go get them the next game. Oh, look at our schedule. Lo and behold, it's the lowly Orlando Magic. No problem. We can beat the Orlando Magic. Not a big deal. Repeat butt kicking. That's what happened. You get a repeat butt kicking. How does that happen? How does this happen? I don't get it. I understand you have injuries. I really do. Tom Thibodeau had injuries too, and guess what? He still brought that team to one of the 3 best records in the conference. It brought them ready to play every night. It was clear they didn't want to play for Thibodeau anymore. So they bring in a hand-picked coach that they're all going to be ready to play for. Offensive coach, ready to go. And what do? They don't want to play for him either. What does that tell you about your roster? And then let's just back up and talk about a few other points quickly. Tony Snell missed the plane to a game. I'm going to pause for a second to let that sink in. I'm rubbing my face. Probably when my hands sound weird. Tony Snell missed the team plane. Then they let him play. He played that game. He got on another flight on his own, and he played in the game. I tweeted, had a tweet conversation, a Twitter conversation. I don't know the tenses of Twitter, tweet, but I talked to my friends and and I have to say it that way because that's the way they say it. It's BAWL. great podcast. If you love podcasts and you love Chicago sports, definitely listen to them. They are hilarious, great dudes. But anyways, I mentioned to them, how are you going to let Tony Snell play? And they said, too many injuries. Who else are you going to play? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm sure you could find somebody on the street, one of these fringe players, the guys that you signed to 10-day contracts. I'm sure there's any number of one of those that just sitting there going, chomping at the bit going, I'm ready to play, put me in. You sign him to a stupid 10-day contract and let him play. And you let Tony Snell sit there and stew. You can't let Tony Snell play. The inmates are running the asylum. And it's not just the inmates are running the asylum. It's the inmates are running the asylum from multiple perspectives. The players are running the show from the bottom end, and then you've got I was gonna say Jed and Theo. I had Cubs on the brain. Sorry, you have Gar and Pax. Then they're the inmates running it from the top, and you've got poor Gar Forman that has no. God, what am I talking about? You have poor Fred Hoiberg that has no idea what he just walked into. And this guy he's a puppet coach for Tweedledee and Tweedledum as general manager and president. And then the players don't respect him at all. And he's just sitting there going, I don't know what to do. This is a crappy situation. And there is so much blame to go around for this whole team. And let's start, we rant enough from the bottom up. Let's start from the top down. That's where we'll start with our blame. Let's play the blame game. Jerry Reinsdorf. Let's start right there with the owner. Jerry Reinsdorf. Where does he play a part in all of this? One, he is loyal to his top brass to a fault. Gar and Pax, he is loyal to the end to these two for some unknown reason. I don't get it. I can't figure out what their strategy is. They won't do a full rebuild, but they won't go all in to put a championship roster together. It seems like they're happy maintaining this certain level of, well, let's get to the playoffs and then anything could happen. No. In baseball, you get into the playoffs and anything can happen. The NFL, you can get into the playoffs and anything can happen. In hockey and basketball, once you hit the playoffs, not anything can happen. Hockey and basketball, usually the team, especially basketball, it's the teams that are great and have the greatest stars, the greatest star power, rise to the top. So it's not just anything can happen. I mean, sure, LeBron could break his leg in a game, and Steph Curry could get abducted before a game. Yeah, I guess anything could happen. But in the realm of likelihood of things will happen, is they're going to beat you every time. You're not going to beat Cleveland, even if you get by some. Let's just say, for poops and giggles, that the Bulls do make the playoffs, because right now they are right on that bubble. They're oscillating back and forth between being the 8th seed, the last team that makes the playoffs, and the 9th seed, or the 9th team, the first team that doesn't make the playoffs, and they are back and forth in there. And I don't even know if they will make the playoffs in this awful, awful East. So let's say you make the playoffs. You make that 8th seed. Hell, let's give you the benefit of the doubt. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. You get the 7th seed. So you don't have to play Cleveland the first round. Because that's I don't want to stack the odds here, but let's just say that you get that 7th seed. So you're one from the last. And so you don't have to play Cleveland right off the bat. And let's see the standings really quickly. I'm just trying to see who is second in the conference. I think it's Toronto, but I'm not positive. I haven't looked at it in a couple of weeks because the Bulls are so bad. It's loading now, so give me a second. It is Toronto. So, if let's just say you get the 7th seed and you gain that game on Indiana on the Pacers, and you get Toronto. What are the odds you beat Toronto in the first round? Well, I guess that could happen. You've done pretty well against Toronto this season, but you've not done well against Boston. You've not done well against Miami. You've not done well against Atlanta. You've not done well against Charlotte. You're not going to beat Indiana, probably. Then you can't beat Cleveland in a series. That's the East. That's the East. Then let's just look at the West. Just hypothetically here. Miracle happens and you get through and you make the Eastern Conference, you win the Eastern Conference Finals. You've got Golden State, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, the Clippers that you can't beat. You can't beat those teams. I don't know what dream world they're in. So you have Jerry Reinsdorf that backs Tweedledee Tweedledum at is his top brass. Gar and Pax, they won't go all in to try to build a championship roster, and they won't go all in to completely tear this down and pull a 76ers and just tank and try to get top draft picks. They're just in limbo. They're just in limbo, and this is the NBA. Anything can happen when you make the playoffs. It's the best teams are going to rise up. Sure, you may have a surprise. Instead of Golden State in the finals, San Antonio may win, but those are two really good teams. When two really good teams play, things can happen. But when a mediocre, sub-mediocre team like the Bulls plays a good team like Cleveland, that is not, anything can happen. This isn't a Disney movie. So they have to pick and choose what they want to do. Are the Bulls a team that they want to try to compete and win with, or are they a team that's in rebuilding mode? And when you listen to them after the trade deadline, they're talking about re-signing Paul Gasol and Joakim Noah. And they won't trade Taj. They're telling you straight to your face, they're going to put this same roster back on the floor for you next year. This team that didn't want to play for the coach, that's right now is a half game out of being out of the playoffs. They're half game from being out of the playoffs, and everybody's gonna be a year older, and they're going to prance them out again for you, as if that has any hope for a championship. That's what they're telling you. That's what they're telling you. Their big free agent signing is going to be re-signing Joakim Noah and re-signing Paul Gasol. And then they're like, we don't got any more money than anybody else. That's what they're giving you. That's a slap in your face as a fan. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And then you have them. They fired Thibodeau for a hand-picked coach. And they are 500 in the awful East and almost out of the playoffs. So besides not even trying to put a winning team together, they have a hand-picked coach to run this roster, and he can't do it. And then let's go to Hoiberg. Hoiberg can't decide what he is. Is he the guy that's going to be the buddy coach and get them to fall in love with him and run his roster or run his game plan because they are in love with him and they want to work hard for him? Or is he hellfire and brimstone coach? He has no idea what he's going to do to get this roster motivated and play the style of basketball he wants to play. He can't figure out how to do it. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. He knows X's and O's well. He was in NBA for a number of years. He was was front office. He knows basketball. I don't take that away from him. He just doesn't know how to motivate an NBA roster. And then let's just go down the line of the players. Is Paul Gasol talks the talk but doesn't walk the walk. He's like at the end of blowout games, he's like, we need to play defense and we're not doing these things and blah, blah, blah. But do it. You've been around for 47 years. Just shut up and do it. This is what we need to do. You're a professional. You just do it. Jimmy Butler is, first it's not. Jimmy wants the coach to coach harder. Coach coaches harder. And then Jimmy doesn't want to play for that system. And then Jimmy's hurt. Derrick Rose is too sore to play. He's working for a max contract in 2 years. He's got to be ready for that. So he can't play when he's a little sore. His body's telling him no. And Mirotic, he wasn't what we were promised. And then he's been out for like 100 years now with pancreatitis. Then you could point to injuries. That's a legitimate thing. You can say this team has had a metric poop ton of injuries, and they have. But at what point can you just say we can't look past the injuries and this team is just bad? Like what point can you do that? Like when does that happen? Like I said, is you thought that game against Miami was bad, then you follow it up with the Orlando game, which is even more embarrassing because it was a worse team. Up until last night, you had a 4-game losing streak, and you were only 3-7 in your last 10. You have Aaron Brooks, who's a disgrace, gets kicked out of a game and just walks off, doesn't care. He should be booted from this team. He shouldn't be a part of this roster. He doesn't add anything to it. He has a bad attitude. Just boot him. Adios. Goodbye. You got to start controlling this roster. In that Miami game, Miami only played 8 guys. They only played 8 guys, and they shot almost 70% from the floor for the game. That's no defense there. 70% from the floor. Bulls gave up 74 points in the paint. This is just pathetic. And I had a question somebody said is, did this win last night against the Houston Rockets, is that a turning point for the Bulls? And maybe. I'm not a psychic. I don't think so, though. I really don't think so, because the Houston Rockets are in a really, really similar situation to the Bulls. They're a team that was supposed to contend for an NBA final championship. And instead, they are right at the bottom. They're the 8th seed in the West, and they can't figure things out. It's almost like looking in a mirror. You have a malcontent big man who wants to be gone and didn't get traded. And that could be Dwight Howard, or that could be Paul Gasol. You have a franchise scorer who isn't working well within your offense, and that could be Jimmy Butler, or that could be James Harden from the Rockets. It's just, there's a lot of parallels to these two teams, and to say that it's a turning point for the Bulls to beat that team is one of those teams had to win. It's not like you beat Golden State or San Antonio. You beat a team that was a lot like you. One of those teams had to win. I don't think that means that the winning team is going to turn it around. So, in my opinion, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I don't think so. I think we're going to stay the course, and it's going to be really similar here to what we're going and the path we're going. Maybe it gets a little better because Jimmy Butler's back, but I don't see this team getting leaps and bounds better. What else do we have for the Bulls? I really think that's it for the Bulls. I want to transition a little bit. I'm not going to do much Cubs and Sox. I'm not going to do any Cubs and Sox talk today. Spring training games just started, sort of feeling out the water. seeing what's going on. No big moves made or anything. So I haven't watched any of the games yet, so we'll leave it at that. Let's talk about the Blackhawks next. Then after that, we'll move on to the NFL draft / the Chicago Bears, because I think that'll be a little more fun. The Blackhawks is... I don't have too much to say, but after that Bruins game where you had Corey Crawford sat down and Scott Darling had the start for that game and didn't look so good, how can you deny that what Corey Crawford means to this team? There was a lot of people calling for Corey Crawford to get traded after last season. I don't see it. Corey Crawford is really valuable as this team. He's just as valuable as Taves or Kane. More valuable than Hossa. Right up there with Duncan Keith. He's a leader on this team. You don't hear a lot about him. He quietly does his job, but he's one of the best goalies in the NHL. And he gets better and better every year. There was a couple years ago where he had some gaping holes, but those have closed up mighty quick. Glove side high, not nearly as big of a concern as it used to be. Corey Crawford is a really good goalie, and when you have a really good goalie, every year you have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. When you put this new roster together after your trades and such, you have to expect Andrew Ladd to make your top line better, especially when Marian Hossa comes back, which there's a game going on right now as I'm recording, and I didn't see if Hossa was going to play in this game, but especially when Hossa comes back, you have to expect that Andrew Ladd's addition to that top line is going to make that top line better. The second line, it continues to be good. It's just been solid, consistent, and good all season long. And I just looked quickly, and Hossa's not playing. So that top line is still Andrew Ladd, Jonathan Taves, and Andrew Shaw. But honestly, once Hossa comes back, you have to expect that Shaw goes back down to either the third or the fourth line, and it's just going to make those lines better. But for today's game, it's Tavo at center in the third line with Desjardins and Fleischmann on either side of them. And then that fourth line, you've got Dennis Rasmussen at center, and then Dale Weiss and Richard Panik on either side of them. And again, you're gonna get better. That top line is gonna be much better. That second line, it's really hard to be better than that second line has been for the Blackhawks. The third and fourth lines are gonna get much better once Hossa comes back, and that's just how it goes. And it's just gonna take a little bit of time for these guys to feel each other out. I know we've only got maybe 15 games left in the season before the playoffs start, and it doesn't really matter what position the Blackhawks are in going into the playoffs. It's just going to be that they go in, and then anything can happen there. I hear a lot of people bashing John Taves. Not bashing so much, but saying that he's not having a great season and his stats are down, his scoring is down. Jonathan Taves is an absolute consummate professional, and his value to this team is immeasurable. He's one of the best two-way centers in hockey, and the guy, sure, his numbers haven't been where they have been in the past, but every time the pressure's on, that guy comes and rises to the occasion. I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again, is if Jonathan Taves had been on the Titanic, is everybody would have made it to shore, all got on lifeboats, single file line, and everybody would have had a quarter to make a phone call home. That's Jonathan Taves. He rises to the occasion when the situation calls, and once the playoffs start, I don't expect any different from Jonathan Taves. Somebody asked me what I thought was the biggest reason that I felt the Blackhawks are going to win the Stanley Cup again. And for me, the answer is speed. This team, it has a lot of speed, and that's been the hallmark for the Blackhawks for a number of years. Is the speed on this team is pretty incredible. It's really tough to match in the playoffs. People try to match. Look at Minnesota. What they do is they try and Minnesota has tried to do it, and Winnipeg has tried to do it, where they match the Blackhawks' speed with big bruising bodies and big hits, and trying to slow them down that way. And it's really hard to do. Is if you can't match speed with the Blackhawks, eventually they're going to get to you, and they're going to score a lot of goals, and they're going to make you look silly. That's the way that works. Is the only way to stop the Blackhawks is you have to have good speed yourself, and you have to frustrate them at the point of entry in the zone. And if you can't do and make them dump and chase, and that's where you can frustrate the Blackhawks. You take time and space away from Patrick Kane, and then break up their entries and make them dump and chase and frustrate them. You're going to keep the scoring down, and those are the types of games that you're going to win 1-0, 2-1, if you're lucky. But if you let the Blackhawks get into the zone and set up scoring, you better be beating them 6-4 or 6-5, because they're going to put some goals on the board, and that's just the way it is. If I had to pick one thing that was most troubling for the team and what could be their downfall from winning the Stanley Cup this year, I'd have to say the PK. The penalty kill has been really troubling. The past several years, they've been one of the best penalty killing teams in the NHL. Sure, they've had trouble scoring on the penalty, on the power plays, but the penalty kill, they've always been really good. And if it's my money down on it, I would much rather have you, if you're in the playoffs and you're a team I'm rooting for, I would much rather have you have your penalty kill on point than your power play on point. That just because if your PK is not on, you're going to be giving up several goals. If your power play is on point, maybe you get 1 out of 3. So you're going to be giving up more than you're getting. But right now their PK is only at 79%, which is 23rd in the NHL, and that's not usually where they are. They're usually like a top 5-6 team in the penalty kill. So that's and again, when you're looking at it, this team is new, and they're new playing together, and it takes a lot of communication and anticipation to be a good penalty kill team, and the team doesn't quite have it yet, especially since there's a lot of people. Usually it's been a very small group of players looking to kill penalties for the Blackhawks, and they've asked a lot more guys to step up this year, and you've got some new faces on there. It just hasn't gelled yet, and you would hope that, especially with Hossa coming back, that it's going to pick up and be better for the playoffs. I really do expect that. Looking at the defense is a little bit of a question mark as well. Nicholas Hjalmarsson has had a great season, absolutely great season. Duncan Keith is having a decent season for him. If he was another player, it would probably be a really, really good year. But as far as the standard that you expect out of Duncan Keith, a Norris Trophy caliber season, he's just having a decent season, and that's a little troubling, because you sort of need him to step up, especially going into the playoffs where Joel Quenneville is going to give him more minutes and expect more ice time from him. He's going to have to take it up even another notch. Siebes has been down a bit this year. Scoring's fine, but his defense has not been that great. Michael Rosefall is old and slow, and then you basically have 3 rookies that you've been cycling through, and I throw Trevor Van Riemsdyk in there with a rookie because of how much time he missed last year. But you basically have 3 rookie defensemen. So Joe Quenneville's got to be a little trouble with that. Is you would hope that they would have added somebody in the trade period, but they're going to have to go with what they got. Like I said, are there concerns going into the playoffs? sum it up, new players need time to gel. You've got some defensive struggles. You're still not having scoring consistency, and you got to get Hossa back. And we talked a little bit about all those. I think these last 15 games or whatever we have, I think that's when you'll start seeing players gel together a little more. I think Quenneville will be a little less likely to switch around lines because once everyone's healthy, I think he's going to want them playing together and getting familiar with each other. The defensive struggles, they are going to be what they're going to be. Is you hope Seabrook and Keith can put that extra gear in there once the playoffs start. And Roosevelt is, Roosevelt's not fabulous and he's not fast, but he's usually pretty good about knowing where Quenneville wants him to be and getting there. And it's his consistency that Quenneville likes. So you hope that he can keep that consistency going and then take what you can get from the rookies. And then Hossa hopefully is back soon and Kruger's back soon, because once those two guys get back, it's going to add to your penalty kill improvement and to your defensive improvement, because they're both good defensive players. Hossa's a great defensive forward, and Kruger's a good defensive two-way man. So here's to winning another Stanley Cup. And then last but not least, I know most of you guys are waiting for the Chicago Bears talk, is let's talk about the Chicago Bears. I broke down the tight ends in this draft. And I got a little bit of free agency talk and news, and then we can wrap this up. So let's see what to do. I guess first, let's talk about Martellus Bennett. I've said it since before the season ended, but especially since the season ended, I felt that it was in the Bears' best interest to trade Martellus Bennett. Malcontent, wants a new contract badly, even though he's in the middle of a pretty good contract, and not a great locker room guy, will throw people under the bus. And this is a team that's full of young players, and a new coaching staff and a young general manager that's trying to get better. You don't need that. If you're a team that's good and has an established coach for your team, an established general manager, and a culture that you've built already, like a New England, then you can bring in players like that because you let the system solve the problem. You're not going to disrupt the locker room of New England by bringing in a guy like Martellus Bennett. But a locker room that hasn't built that culture yet, that you haven't fully implemented what you're trying to do for this team, things like that are poisonous to the team, and you can't have that. I get Martellus Bennett is a good player, but he's not good enough to warrant the level of his attitude and the distractedness and the attention he brings to himself. It doesn't warrant it. And I think if you're the Bears, you got to move him. But I don't know. Don't get your hopes set on that you're going to get a first, second, or third round pick for him. You're probably, if you get anything, maybe a fifth. Talent-wise, yeah, if he was on a rookie contract, you could probably get a decent pick for him. But because a team is going to have to pay a lot of money for him, they're not going to want to give up a pick for him as well. Maybe if you're lucky, you can get a decent player for him from somebody that has an abundance of one position and needs a tight end. Maybe that happens, but you don't get a ton of player for player trades in the NFL. Usually it'll be on draft day, you'll get a player for a pick type trade. So I don't know, and I'm not super hopeful what you'll get for Martellus Bennett. But if you can move him, that adds like another $6 million to your salary cap that you could use to sign another player. That's what I'm hopeful for. If you can get a 5th-round pick for him, sure, you take it. But if you can just unload him for, honestly, I bet they get a 7th-round pick for him, maybe a conditional 6th-round pick, or maybe they get a 5th-round pick and then trade 1 or 2 of their 6th-round picks. I don't know. There'll be some sort of convoluted thing, but it's either going to be a Martellus and a pick for a pick, or Martellus for a low pick, if you're able to get rid of them. But now that we're on tight ends, I want to talk about the tight ends in the NFL draft. If you're new to the show, once the Super Bowl hits and until the NFL draft happens, every week we pick a position. I usually predetermine it. This year I've switched it up a tiny bit here and there, just based on my schedule and my interest level. Every year, certain positions are more interesting than others, either based on Bears' need or based on the quality of players at that position. So, and sometimes I'm just really busy because it takes a lot of time to watch game film. And I don't just watch highlight reels. I don't go to YouTube and type in player X and watch the highlight reel with the rap song over the top of it. I don't watch that because that doesn't tell me anything. Everybody's got a highlight reel. I'm sure if you put on any player ever, they have some sort of highlight reel. I don't want to see that. It doesn't matter to me. I watch actual game film. So what it is it's spliced together of an entire game. Every single snap that player was on the field, whether it be special teams or what, every single snap that they're on the field. If they're a wide receiver and that team didn't even throw a pass the entire game, I'll watch every single snap and see what that player does when he doesn't have the ball. I'll see how he lines up. I'll look for everything. Does he block well? Does he avoid contact? That's what I want to know. I want to know what they're doing, not just when it's a highlight play, but every other play. So for the tight ends, there wasn't too many of them that were that good. As far as top tight ends. So we just have a handful of guys that I looked at. And this goes true for every week, I can't watch film on every single player in the draft. I don't have enough time. I have a more than full-time job. I have a part-time job on top of that. I have a wife and a kid and a house to maintain, and I just can't do it. But I love doing this. So I draw an arbitrary line in the sand and say I'm only going to do these a couple of guys. Basically, guys up until I think are going to be like 4th-rounders. But if there's somebody you're really interested in, I have zero problem going back and looking at film of that guy and talking about it the next show. And if the Bears draft somebody that I didn't talk about, of course I'm going to go back and look at that player. With that said, let's start with the first tight end I looked at, which is Hunter Henry from Arkansas. 6'5", 250. Pros, he's got good size at 6'5", 250. Decent tight end speed, nice hands, runs really nice routes. But he's not a great blocker. He could stand to put on some bulk, so he's a nice height and he's got a nice frame on him, but he could put on some bulk because he looks, in the NFL, he's going to look a little thin. And he doesn't always attack the ball when there's contested passes. So when a defensive back or a linebacker is coming in and trying to defend the pass, he doesn't attack the ball. He doesn't go at it. He's very passive in his receptions, which in the NFL is not going to be good. He's going to have to learn to attack it. He's a nice prospect. He reminds me a bit of Greg Olsen. Definitely not as talented as Greg Olsen, but he's in that very Greg Olsen mold. Next is Austin Hooper, 6'4", 254 out of Stanford. Pros, he looks really fast out there. He played against big time competition at playing for Stanford. Runs routes like a wide receiver. He's a very willing blocker. He will go out there and just throw his nose in there and then try to block as best he can. He doesn't quite have the size of an NFL tight end. He's got the height, but he just doesn't look like the frame of an NFL tight end. But he's too big to be a wide receiver. He's a little bit of a tweener in that way. I like Austin Hooper a lot. I think he's going to step right in and be a day one starter for a team. I like his football IQ. a couple of games, I saw this quarterback scramble, and he broke his route and started running towards the quarterback to make for an easier throw. He's very headsy when he's playing. He knows what he should be doing. He'll run downfield to put in a block, and that says a lot about him as a football player. I like Austin Hooper a lot, and I think his football IQ and his willingness to work really hard move him ahead of a lot of people. Have Hunter Henry as the best tight end. I move Austin Hooper above him based on those attributes. Next is Nick Vannett from Ohio State, 6'6", 257. He's by far the best tight end as a blocking tight end. He's the best blocking tight end of the group I reviewed. He's almost like a mini extra tackle out there. He's a really good blocker. And at 6'6", 257, he's a big guy. But he's basically a non-factor in the passing game. For me, it just depends on what you're looking for. I mean, I just don't know what you're going to get from him in a passing game. But if you're a run-first team and you want to put in a heavy package, you could put a Nick Vannett in and have him it'd be better than an extra tackle like the Bears used to do, because the tackle is zero threat of catching. He's at least a threat to make a catch. So for a run-first team, this could be your better option at a tight end. Next is Tyler Higbee, 6'6", 250 out of Western Kentucky. He's a great blocker, but when he's running out there, he doesn't really have the best center of balance. He looks a little gangly when he's running, which is it's kind of funny, especially if you watch it in fast forward. You're like, you just want to put the Benny Hill music over it. He's a lot like Nick Vannett, but I think he's a better receiving option, but not as good of a blocker. A little bit of a wash on those two. And then the last guy I reviewed, I didn't review very many tight ends. I didn't think too many of them were spectacular, is Bryce Williams, 6'5", 257 out of East Carolina. Really not much separates Nick Vannett, Tyler Higbee, and Bryce Williams, other than Bryce Williams has an awful haircut. I hope he clips it before the NFL draft, but on draft day, remember Bryce Williams out of East Carolina, because he's just got, or Google him, he's just got terrible hair. So that really separates him from the other two. But those last three guys, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. It depends on what you're looking for. I don't grade them too much apart. If I was the Bears, I probably wouldn't touch any of them, because unless you just want them for a blocking tight end, in which case I would probably go Nick Vannett. But if one gets picked in the 4th round and the other one's still waiting in the 5th round, you'd much rather spend a 5th rounder. There's not a whole round difference between these two. They're pretty much grade out the same to me. What else? That's it for my tight end coverage. But let's move on to the Bears in free agency a little bit. I don't know if you guys know this, but in the NFL, it used to be free agency started at point X. That's when you could sign players. And if you remember when the Bears signed Julius Peppers, it was basically like 2 minutes after the period started, the free agency period started, and they were like, "Oh, we've already negotiated a contract and signed it with Julius Peppers for $1 bajillion." And probably a lot of people were like, "How the heck can you negotiate that salary and all of these points, write a contract, have the agent review it, get the player on board, sign it, then send it back to the team in order to announce this when it just opened 5 minutes ago?" So we all know that every team violated the rules about when they can contact players and their representation. So the NFL decided to put in this time period a couple days before the open of free agency where you can talk to anybody. You can't sign a contract, but you can start talking to teams, gauge interest, to throw numbers around, and then you can't sign until a certain point. So the negotiation period starts tomorrow, which is Monday the 7th. And then Wednesday at 4 p.m. East Coast time, so 3 p.m. in Chicago time, is when free agency actually opens. So from Monday and Tuesday, early Wednesday, is you can start negotiating with a team. I mean, a guy can start negotiating with a team, vice versa, to sign, but they can't officially sign anything until Wednesday at 3 p.m. Chicago time. So it's kind of like a wild west situation going on. Who could the Bears be looking at? Let's talk about some of the names that are out there for the Bears. I threw a few names that A, had been tossed around, and B, that I would like to see, that I think would help the Bears and could be affordable options. If they cut Antrel Roll, which I highly suspect they will, they're already looking to trade Martellus Bennett. They could have around $70 million to spend. So it's not going to be an issue of money. It's going to be an issue of finding a guy that they feel comfortable giving that money to. Because the Bear, unlike Jerry Angelo, the Jerry Angelo era, where they would just sign a big name free agent and hope that just cured all the woes, is Ryan Pace has a plan, and he doesn't want to get locked into big time money with free agents that cripples the team later on and creates a situation. He wants to be smart about it. His ultimate goal, and I fully agree with it, is to build through the draft and have successful drafts and then reward the players that are playing well in your system, because it's always better to sign a good player that's on your team already than to sign some guy that played in a different system under a different coach, because that adds a lot of risk to what you do. So let's talk about a couple names. One, Aldon Smith, 3-4 outside linebacker. He is currently serving a minimum of a 1-year ban from the NFL for substance abuse, DUI, hit and run, blah, blah, blah. The earliest he could come back and he has to apply to return, would be November. So he wouldn't be able to play until November, and so it would be and after the Ray McDonald situation, signing Aldon Smith would be a huge risk for the Bears. But look what he did. Look what he did with the 49ers. Look what he did with Oakland before he got suspended. And you just ask yourself is what he would look like as a Chicago Bear. And I think he's only like 26 or 27 years old. He's still so young. He could be an anchor for your team. He's a really interesting one, and you would have to eat a lot of crap if you signed him. And I think the Dallas Cowboys are a team that could go ahead and sign him, because they've already made it clear they'll sign anybody. Winning football is the most important thing for them. But the Bears are not on that same page. They're not that same type of team. They don't do those types of things. And when they do, they blow up in their face. So you have to be very, very careful if you're going to sign Aldon Smith, even though he's absolutely a phenomenal talent. Next is, I'm calling him a free agent, but he's a current Bear, is Zach Miller, tight end. I think you really need to sign him or re-sign him. He was looking for approximately $5 million a year. That's ridiculous. You can't pay him $5 million a year. And the Bears did the smart thing, is they're going to let him pursue the free agent market to see his value. And I have a feeling that they said, we would love to have you back. We can't do $5 million a year, so go out and test your value. And before you sign with anybody else, please come back to us and let us know that deal. And if we can do it, we'll match it. I really think that's what they're going to do, and I think it's going to work out in the Bears' favor, because they're going to get him probably for, I would say, $2.5 to $3 million a year, a lot less than $5 million. Now let's go to the more realistic / ambitious / help the team type players. The Bears need another guard. It's that right guard position is still a glaring need, especially with a rookie, a very young, still inexperienced center You want to make sure that you have an established, really good guard that's going to step in and play alongside him and really help anchor. So a couple of guards that are in the market that you can hopefully get for a decent deal. First is Jeff Allen. He helped anchor that Chiefs offensive line. He's equally as good as a pass blocker and a run blocker. And he's still young at 26 years old, and he and Slauson would be a hell of a good guard combo. I like Jeff Allen a lot. Then there's Ramon Foster. He's a bit older than Jeff Allen, but a bit of a better player as well. Played amazingly well last year against a backup center in Pittsburgh. So he was playing next to a backup center and still played really well and looked really good. So if you put him against just a starting caliber but a young Hronis Grasu, is you hope that he plays even better and makes Hronis Grasu better. Next is Alex Boone, guard. At 28, he has some experience under his belt. But he's not too old, so he's got that nice balance of having several years of playing, but not being over the hill either. He's right in his prime. He's possibly the best pass blocking guard in the NFL, and he played for a bad San Francisco team, so that tells you something. So those are 3 guards that you could sign and really plug and play right there and instantly make your offensive line better. And in a situation where, fingers crossed, anything can happen. Let's say a Laramie Tunsil falls a little bit and the Bears are able to draft Laramie Tunsil and put him at left tackle. Suddenly, and you sign any one of these 3 guys, you've got a Pro Bowl at right tackle, a Pro Bowl caliber guy at right guard. You've got an up-and-coming young center. You've got a really solid, probably top 10, top 12 guard in the NFL. It's Lawson and left guard. And then you have the best offensive tackle in the draft at left tackle. Your line, theoretically, on paper, looks pretty darn good. What else? Let's look at some defensive players that are available. Now, you've got one guy that could really just step in and help you a lot and really good, and the team doesn't necessarily need him because they're stacked at that position, would be Muhammad Wilkerson, the 3-4 defensive end from the Jets. Well, he would play 3-4 defensive end for the Bears, but from the Jets, he's been tagged by the Jets, so you can't just sign him outright, but the Jets are willing to trade him. Could you put a package together with Martellus Bennett to maybe a pick to get Muhammad Wilkerson? I don't know, but he would really be helpful to the Bears because he's a beast. Jay Howard out of Kansas City, he mauled Hronis Grasu when the Bears played them. He absolutely mauled him. He doesn't have very many miles on his body, and he's got a lot of high upside. Jay Howard could be had for a fraction of some of those Denver players, and he's got a lot of upside to him. So he's a definite plus. There's Malik Jackson on the defensive line, but the problem is he looked so good for a really dominant Denver Broncos defense. You're gonna have to go into a bidding war to get him. Is he worth the money that you're gonna pay for him? There's Oliver Vernon from the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins transition tagged him, so if anybody offers him a contract, the Dolphins have the option to match that contract. And if the Bears do sign him, there's no ramifications as far as draft picks, but the Dolphins do have the option to match that contract. But we've all seen with the transition tag that you can put some sort of poison pill in there to make it hard for the other team to sign him. But he's had, I think, 30 sacks over the last 4 years. That's pretty good production. It's hard to pass that up. Then there's Bruce Irvin, who's a free agent from Seattle. He's made it clear that if money is close, he would much rather play in Seattle. but he's played very, very well in a very high level for the Seattle Seahawks. Who else do we have? Mario Williams. I know a lot of people have messaged me. I think like 3 or 4 people have messaged me asking about the Bears and Mario Williams. And this is a really interesting one, because Mario Williams, as far as talent, is a really talented guy, and when he wants to play, he can be extremely dominant. But there's a couple factors in here. Number one, nobody in the NFL has been able to consistently motivate him. Not Rex Ryan. Nobody's been able to consistently motivate this guy. He's only ever played as a 4-3 defensive end. So if you take him with the Bears and you sign him, he's going to have to be willing to make a transition to a different position. And we saw that didn't work out so well with Jared Allen, who's going to be a Hall of Fame 4-3 defensive end, and he just really couldn't do it. So I really think Mario Williams has the ability to make that transition, but it's whether he wants to. Can you motivate him to play hard and transition him to another position all at the same time? It's going to be tough. Plus, he's going to want big money. The other guy who I've gotten a lot of questions about is Chris Long. And I wasn't going to talk about him, but I'm going to mention him just because I've gotten so many questions, and I want to make sure I've answered all of your questions and comments that you bring to me. Is other than the fact that he has the last name Long, and it's Kyle Long's brother, that's really all that the interest, as far as I'm concerned, goes. Is he's on the wrong side of 30. He hasn't been that productive for the Rams. The Rams got rid of him, and he's had a lot of injuries and not a lot of production. And you're going to ask him to change position as well. I don't think that's a good match for the Bears. Mario Williams could be interesting. You're going to pay him a lot of money for him, but I think he's got the talent to be able to do it. I don't think Chris Long has the skill anymore to be able to do that. So I would sort of be done with him. Who else? We've gone through edge rushers. We've gone through defensive line. We've gone through guard. Let's talk cornerbacks. Janoris Jenkins is an interesting name. He's I wouldn't say he's an elite corner. He's pretty close to being an elite corner, but he would cost the Bears a lot of money. And how aggressive is Ryan Pace going to be if they want to sign him? So that'd be interesting to see. But he's a cornerback that I'm interested in. He had suspect interception numbers last year, but was super dependable. I think he's a very, very good corner. Just how much is going to cost to get him? There's Sean Smith out of Kansas City. He's a big corner. At 6'3", 210. He might be the best corner that's available on the market. I don't know if how much he's worth. Those are really the only 2 cornerbacks in free agency that I would be interested in, and I would rather bring back Porter than maybe sign one of these guys to an overpriced contract. And then that leaves us with, I believe, safety is the last position that I was looking at. Inside linebacker. Sorry. You've got James Laurinaitis, who's an interesting one. The Rams got rid of him, probably for salary cap reasons, but he's been super dependable for a number of years for the Rams. He's a smart guy, tough guy, very consistent guy. But if you're the Bears, you need more speed at the inside linebacker position. I don't know if Laurinaitis gives you that speed, but he's definitely tough and could be a good inside linebacker. If it might be interesting if you sign him and then you pair him with somebody like one of the injured inside linebacking prospects from the draft, and then slowly go that way. I don't know. But he's an interesting one, and I'm interested in seeing what the Bears think about him. And if we see any rumors in the next day or two about the Bears' interest in him. The name that's going to be tied to the Bears like nobody else is Danny Trevathan, because of how well he played for the Denver Broncos and how good the Denver Broncos defense was, and he was an anchor on that defense, and his ties to John Fox. But I think Danny Trevathan is going to get a lot of money. I don't think he's going to be worth the money that he's given, even though he's very, very good. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. An interesting name that maybe the Bears consider would be a Rolando McClain. He's still fairly young. He's fast. And when he's playing, he plays at a top level. And he was a big playmaker for the Dallas Cowboys. He's an interesting name. The issue that concerns me is the Cowboys are probably going to want to sign him to a lot of money because he was so important to that defense. But another part of me could say, well, the Cowboys know they stink, and they're going to move another direction to save money and try to put that towards younger players. I don't know. It would be nice to see. I like Rolando McClain a lot. And then the last position we're going to talk about is safety. There's a few safeties that are interesting in this free agent period, but I don't love a lot of them. There's two that I'm interested in. Is Eric Weddle, my first one. At 31, he's coming off an injury, but he's still one of the better safeties in the NFL. Very interesting one to see what kind of years and money he's going to want. But if you can get him for, like, I would say a 3-year deal, you got to consider it because he can still play. And then George Iloka, he's a big guy at 6'4", 225 that can cover a tight end. And he's pretty good in coverage still, and he's still young at 25. He's an interesting one. He played for Cincinnati, and Cincinnati had a pretty good defense. He was overshadowed by Reggie Nelson, but he has good size, and he played at Boise State with Shea McClellan, which is something. So those are some names that are not the huge names in free agency, but are going to be some people that the Bears are probably going to look at. I have a feeling that they're going to sign a bunch of one-year prove-it deals with people, but I feel like they're going to make one or two splash moves, especially for people either going into their prime or right in the middle of their prime, and that's the guys I was sort of looking at. So we shall see with the Bears. And then last but not least is every week from now until the draft, I want to do a mock draft. I've done 2 already, so this is going to be mock draft version 3. And the way I do the mock drafts is some writers and sportscast guys will just be like, well, I mocked this guy to the Bears because they have a need at this position, and this guy has this round grade. I don't do it that way because that adds a lot of bias and a lot of control over what happens. Sometimes a team's going to come out of left field and draft a guy in the second round that's maybe a 4th or 5th round grade for everybody else. It doesn't matter if the rest of the world thinks somebody is a 3rd round pick or 3rd round grade. If one NFL GM feels that team or that guy is a 1st round grade, that's all it takes. So it's hard to add that level of unknownness into a mock draft. So I use this website called firstpick.com. It's the word first -pick.com, and it's a draft game, but the way they do it is they have some sort of algorithm in there, and it goes in the order, and the computer will pick for every team other than the team you choose. And based on the team's need for position and ranking of players, they drafts for them. And when you do it, sometimes you'll see some crazy stuff where, like a Laramie Tunsil, who most mock drafts have him going in the top 3 or 4 picks, maybe even 5th pick. Nobody has him falling in past that. But I've seen, on this program, something crazy when he falls to 11 and available for the Bears. So I like to use this to kind of add some level of realism into the draft and some unexpectedness. So sometimes a guy I'm really coveting in the third round, and then he gets drafted by the team before me, and that's frustrating. But you have to be able to step in and go with your next guy. You can't always control it like that. So here's my mock draft for March 6, 2016, my mock draft version 3.0. In the first round, with the 11th pick in the first round, I have the Bears drafting Miles Jack, linebacker out of UCLA. Miles Jack is probably, if he doesn't get hurt last season and with a severe injury, would be the number one pick in this draft, the best player in this draft. He's phenomenal. I can't evaluate him. I have no access to his medical records or giving him a physical of any sort. I'm assuming that he's going to come back from the injury and be able to play really, really well. And if you're the Bears and you get him at 11, the best player in the draft at pick 11, you got to consider that a steal. And if he comes back and plays like he can, he's going to be better than Brian Urlacher. I'm putting my money on it now, if he comes back healthy. Going round 2, pick number 10 in round 2, I have the Bears taking Darian Thompson, the free safety out of Boise State. With the 9th pick in the third round, I have the Bears taking Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle out of Louisville. Now, this is one where I have him as I like Sheldon Rankins. I think I probably have a tiny bit lower than a lot of people, but there's some people that have first-round grades on him, like late first round. I have him probably early to mid-second round grade. But this is a time where it was through an anomaly. He fell through the cracks and fell late and in this program. So Sheldon Rankins was available in my third round. I took him. He's a steal at that round. The 8th pick in the fourth round, I have Maurice Kennedy, cornerback out of Virginia. Maybe a little high to pick him, but based on the players that were available, he was probably better than most. It's not a steal, but right around where he should go. Round 5, pick number 11 in round 5, I have the Bears taking C.J. Prosise. Again, I like the Bears running backs. I really do. I think they have 2 really good running backs. But if you can add a third guy, a third-headed monster, and a late pick, and a really good player like C.J. Prosise in the 5th round, you sort of got to do it. Makes your team that much better, especially now that you've already established that you're not signing Matt Forte again. The 10th pick in round 6, I have the Bears taking Blake Martinez, inside linebacker out of Stanford. Then with the 29th pick in the 6th round, I have the Bears taking Tavon Young, cornerback out of Temple. The 31st pick in the 6th round, I have the Bears taking Jordan Payton, wide receiver out of UCLA. It's a steal at this round. And then with the last pick for the Bears, I have in the 9th pick in the 7th round, I have the Bears taking Aziz Shitu, defensive end out of Stanford. I think overall, if the Bears could get this draft, I think it's a steal for them. Not everybody's going to click. You're not going to have all 9 picks make the roster. Somebody's going to get cut. Maybe some goes to practice squad, but I think you get a lot of value for this draft with this draft. So the last thing I want to talk about is I had several questions this week. Sometimes I get weeks with no questions. Sometimes I get a bunch. One, I got asked, am I nervous for the Cubs? And I think if you listen to the show, you know I like both Chicago teams, but I'm a diehard Cubs fan. Cubs are my team. Am I nervous? I don't know if nervous is the right word. I'm well aware that once this team is, barring any sort of catastrophic injuries, this team is going to make the playoffs. And once the Major League Baseball playoff start, the World Series playoff start, anything can happen. It's baseball. A team could go on a hot streak, a team could go on a cold streak. You never know. It's just it's such a randomness. That's why your goal for baseball is just make it to the playoffs every year, because anything can happen once you make the playoffs. It's not like NFL. It's not like other sports where the best team wins it or has the best chance of winning it. In baseball, it's just who's hot at the moment. It's kind of comes down to it. And I think the Cubs do have the best roster on paper in baseball, but you're also relying on a lot of guys who are coming into their second year. And we all know about the sophomore slump. So I feel like the Cubs really do have a good chance to win the World Series, but I'm not nervous. I'm tempering my expectations. I'm going to just expect fun, good baseball this year and seeing the Cubs win more than lose. And once the playoffs start, then my nerves will probably kick in. In the regular season, whatever happens, happens. We already talked about whether the Bears should sign Chris Long or Mario Williams, and what will the Bears do in free agency. I covered all those topics. And then I guess the last question is, will the Cubs win the World Series? You're not going to get me with this one. I know better than to jinx it by saying that. I'm going to stick with I think the Cubs will make the playoffs. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to stick with that answer, but they've got a really good roster, and if everybody plays like their pagoda projections say, they're going to be tough to beat. With that, I'm probably going to wrap up the show. If you have questions, you want them on the air, hit us up on Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com /Swerski Sports, or SwerskiSports.com. Any of those ways, I will answer your question. If you emailed me, my email I couldn't remember my password, so I haven't been in there this week. So if you emailed me and I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry right now. I will answer it on the next show. But I try to answer everybody's question or comment, and if you want to be on the air, let me know. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down, I wanna...